Hi, welcome to the Jam. This is our second attempt at this particular podcast subject.
Yes, we
had some technical difficulties.
We did an entire episode, almost an hour long, and I guess the powers that be didn't want to hear anything that I had to say because the sound didn't work on my end. So we did an entire thing. We went through.
It was destiny.
We went all through it. It was a good episode, and in the end, you couldn't hear a single word that I said.
So we're going to cover it again, and we'll see if we're as insightful and articulate as we were last time, because it was beautiful. And this time around, it's probably going to be clunky, awkward, and rehearsed. So we'll see how it goes.
I don't think it's going to be. I think we're going to approach it a little bit differently. We probably learned some things, and we'll see.
Well, and a few things have happened. Yeah, a few things
Yes.
are different here. Where, in particular, that they released the warrant and the list of what was collected. Not that that really says much. It didn't really say much, in my opinion. I just read through it before we started, and I guess we should actually comment on. We just assume that everyone knows what we're talking about. Well, they do now, obviously.
Not really, because
we're talking today about.
Not really.
Yeah, we just pick up where we left off, and
yeah,
don't
we're
introduce
just
the
acting
subject,
as
right?
if we've already done this before. Everybody else is thinking, "What are you
Right.
talking about?"
And I think if anyone isn't aware of the raid on Trump's place in Mar-a-Lago, then you're living under a rock, I guess. So that's kind of the subject that we're talking about. Though on a broader level, we're talking about, do we live in a banana republic now? And I looked up Banana Republic before we did our first recording. And I thought it was funny because if you look at the original definition of Banana Republic, it's like we don't qualify at all, because a Banana Republic was based on the idea that a small country that has a single export upon which their government income, their country's income is reliant. And particularly in Honduras, that they exported bananas. But obviously it's come to have a broader meaning. But I was going to crack a joke about how now the right is redefining words, because we're redefining what a banana republic is. Shame
Well,
on us,
I
right?
don't think that we would. I wouldn't classify it as that. We've said it because it's kind of been assumed for a long time. This is way more than just the last couple of years, but for a very long time, that banana republics were descriptive of the way politics are conducted in Central and Latin countries.
And that's become the understanding exactly when the commentary refers to are we a banana republic, it's talking about a government that's doing sort of underhanded, shady things to their political opponents.
Well, particularly it's when a person seeking power in a government, usually a military personnel, a general or something like that, wanting to oust the president of a country. So they will go in, they'll take the military, they'll oust them, and they will assume control, and then they will put that former person in jail, or they'll kill them, or some government official will go after another government official in some way, and that's what's happening right now.
Did you see that there was one of the I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was a Democrat. It was obviously a Democrat. I wish I could remember. They suggested that Trump. Oh, it was a previous. Now I got to look it up. But they suggested that Trump should be executed.
Well, they've been saying that for a long time. Who was it? It was Kathy Griffin who posted that picture of a dummy figure of Trump's head.
It was the former CIA director, Hayden, suggesting that Trump should be executed for having nuclear documents.
You know, it's really interesting. So, you've got the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. It just makes me cringe to have to say her name. You've got the former Secretary of State who was involved in a lot of crap. Let's just say that she was involved in a lot of crap, especially when you look at stuff like the all of the stuff that she did with her husband with Uranium One, their fake charity where they made millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. They all of her stuff with using her personal servers to conduct business, her personal email to conduct top secret communication, leaking that communication, leaking top secret documents through her personal servers, which is a violation of federal law. And if for anybody to come out and say that because he has a document, because he happened to be the president of the United States, heaven forbid that the president of the United States should have nuclear documents or copies of nuclear documents, of which he didn't leak.
Well, it depends on what they are. Obviously,
he didn't leak anything.
If he had,
he didn't leak anything.
If he had the football, and he was, planning on selling it to Russia, then we'd all be on board. But that's clearly not the case.
But that's clearly what they are trying to say he would do
to make it look like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I don't know. Yesterday when we were talking about it, one of the first questions I asked you was whether you thought the outrage was justified. And you immediately replied, yeah, you did. And I was a little bit more hesitant on that. But I don't know, I'm coming around. I'm feeling like this really is sort of a pretty big breach of the public's trust.
I saw today that there was a guy who tried to break into one of the FBI offices somewhere in the country. He was going to kill people. He shot off a nail gun. And the part of the article that CNN wanted everybody to know was that he was a supporter of Trump and that he was part of the protest on January 6th. That was what, above all things, that they wanted people to know, was that he was a person who was present at the protest on January 6th.
And it's particularly problematic to use individual examples to represent, to try and be representative of what your opponent's actions and positions are, especially when they're one-offs like that.
Did they say anything about the guy who was a Bernie Sanders supporter who shot the at Republican members of Congress?
That was exactly what I was thinking of. And when you see that example, nobody on the right then claimed, see, this is what the left does. This represents the left, and this proves everything. What we do use is when there's repetitive, consistent behavior coming from the left, like the riots with Black Lives Matter and the stuff that you see with Antifa, then we will use that as a representative. But when you just take a one-off instance, because there's going to be nuts on both sides.
Yes.
There's going to be people that do crazy things and do bad things.
Yeah, but how many nuts are on the right versus how many nuts are on the left? We had a whole summer of...
So it depends on where you draw the line.
The whole summer of love. The whole summer of love, which was the George Floyd protests that were supposed to be mostly peaceful. What side was doing that? The entire summer, what side was doing that?
But even when you see examples of larger groups that are behaving badly on the right, you see like examples where they cite the Proud Boys or the whites, even worse, like the what they call part of the right, the far right, the white supremacists and stuff, which they try to then infer and imply that is the right, that's representative of the right,
and nothing could be farther. Nothing could be farther from the truth.
Yeah. And, I think there can be some forgiveness given to the left in general if they'd come up and they'd speak against. Like, I wouldn't blame the entire left for the actions of Antifa or Black Lives Matter, except that everyone in power, including the government and the social media and the big tech conglomerates and those things, they all come out in support of Black Lives Matter as Black Lives Matter, and it makes them complicit.
Well, they support them, and you've got the Vice President of the United States who bailed them out of jail. You've got the people who covered up, or not covered up, but at least won't even speak about the guy who tried to kill Supreme Court Justice.
And nobody on the right justifies it when someone who's labeled right for whatever reason, whether they be far right or just sort of an extremist group of some sort comes out and commits violence or does terrible things. I've never heard a single person justify what happened on January 6th. Yes,
Right.
we say it's
Right.
not as big a deal as they're making it, but everyone says it shouldn't have happened. It was wrong, and the people who were involved deserve appropriate.
If they did something
punishment.
illegal, look, there's video.
If they did something illegal,
there's
exactly.
video of people walking around in the Capitol. Walking around in the Capitol. They didn't participate in any of the mob. They didn't participate in trying to break windows. They walked around. They are being prosecuted by the government because they were there.
Right.
Just because they were
So we
there.
see this.
It's the people's house.
This level of inconsistency and unfair, unequal application of standards, unequal application of the law, and unequal application of censorship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I read through this yesterday, but I'm going to read through it again because it's appropriate, and no one heard it when I read it yesterday. I collected a series of things that indicate the problem. So we see this first, the Mar-a-lago raid, and then you see the January 6th kangaroo court. I think where you have an entirely leftist. The only one that's on the committee is Liz Cheney, who's clearly anti-Trump and can't hardly be considered on the right. You've got subpoenas going out to senators and people who are on Trump's staff. You've got the Russian.
Real quick on those subpoenas. It doesn't seem like it's just a total witch hunt to you. They're just
that's the point I'm getting at. It's all a big witch hunt.
They are just looking for people, even if you had anything to do with Trump in any way, as little as just voting for him or maybe showing up in Washington, D.C., not even going to the Capitol. If you are involved in any way of having anything to do with Trump, they will come after you. This is a complete witch hunt.
Yeah. You see this serious double standard because then on the other side, then you see things like what's happened with Hunter Biden, what happened with Hillary and the emails, not protecting
the
people
cover,
on the right.
the covering up, you mean, of those things?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, covering up and then even when Hunter Biden stuff came out, it was covered up at first. And then when it came out and was accepted as legitimate, still nothing happens. In spite of the fact that there was clear breaking of the law there. Like it wasn't maybe breaking the law. It was very clear and obvious breaking
the
of the
president's
law.
son.
He's on video.
Yeah.
He's on video doing illegal things and no consequence.
Yeah.
And then you see the justices not being protected, and even the hit on not a hit, but the attempted on Justice Kavanaugh's life,
where the media ignored it, completely ignored it.
Yeah, and the media exactly ignores it. And I don't know legally if it was entirely ignored, but certainly the media ignores it and treats it like it's no big deal, and even supports those sorts of actions. Meanwhile, while they're complaining about the people who are protesting outside Mar-a-Lago right now.
Can you say? Can you even say the guy's name who tried to kill Justice Brett Kavanaugh?
Do I know the name now?
Yeah, I mean that's my point. Does anybody know his name? Let's imagine.
Me knowing the name doesn't say much, but most people wouldn't.
Most people do not know. I don't know his name, but imagine that. Do we know the names of people who have committed mass shootings? So what was the mass shooting? It was in 1998 at Columbine High School in Colorado. The names of those two, it was Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Because those names were everywhere. Everybody was talking about those two.
On a side note of interest, I know that the Daily Wire, for example, whenever there's a mass shooting, will not say the shooter's name.
And they shouldn't.
They won't say the name because part of what motivates that sort of behavior is copycat because of notoriety and fame is what they're seeking.
John Wilkes Booth.
And so by trying to do their best to not play into that, the Daily Wire took the position that they won't say the shooter's name.
Yeah.
So way to go saying the shooter's names on our broadcast.
Well, that was 1998, 24 years ago. So
you just caused a mass shooting.
I just caused a mass shooting. Way to go. Yep. Well, but I mean the point is that the left is so quick to shout out the names of anybody on the right that happens to, nick themselves shaving. They will broadcast it all over television because that person is now a hate monger of some kind.
Well, yeah, and it's been said again and again, but I'll repeat it here by different commentators. If you had what happened with Hunter Biden happened to one of Trump's kids, just imagine the difference in the media.
Yes.
Like, it's just ridiculous how obvious it becomes when
they would be drooling and just waiting for an opportunity for something like that to happen to one of Trump's kids.
Oh, and they would have used it to prosecute already.
Yes.
Long
It
since.
would have been news coverage. Well, that's one of the things that really chaps me too is how much the news media gives such little coverage, any negative coverage to the president, the administration, to anything that the government is trying to do to go after anybody. It's nothing but positive for the administration. Did you see the news today about how they are spinning the fact that inflation didn't rise in July?
Yeah.
So they said that it rose 0% in July. That's all they said, despite the fact that it's still 9%.
Yeah, presenting that as if it's a
as
win.
If it the way some people could read that is, oh, we don't have inflation.
Well, I saw a meme today that was making fun of it, where it said, "I finally hit my New Year's goal of losing 10 pounds. Of course, I put on 45 in the first 6 months." That's, so it's like, finally, I lost 10 pounds. I'm only 45 pounds up, or 50, whatever I said, 55 pounds.
Yes. Trying to make lemonade out of lemons is really what they're trying to do. And with the spin that the media gives things, it's this is why we have such a poor, low information, or a very high low information voter base.
Yeah, and it's a huge double standard, and that's really what's kind of swaying me to really kind of be on board with your, call it outrage. I don't know that I emotionally feel outrage, but that sense of
anger. Outrage is, who are we going to be outrageous to? Who are we going to extend our outrage to, other than spouting off like we're kind of doing right now?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not shouting at the TV like a ref made a bad call in a football game or something, sort of outrage.
Yeah, don't ever.
But I definitely
knock that. Don't ever knock that. That is like the most.
That's a thing of beauty.
Horrible injustice of sports is when you see something like that.
Right. But just my sense that justice is not being served. It's real, and I'm scared of it. And I think there's a real problem here. And we see this double standard coming out. Even in this situation where first of all, we know that if former presidents have taken classified documents before, Obama has a whole library full of documents that he brought that he was going to digitize. And Richard Nixon had a whole bunch of things that didn't get turned over. I think I heard it was not until like 2010 or something that the Richard Nixon organization finally returned some of that stuff. That's something that happens, and Trump playing in good faith to work with them, to putting the lock on the room per the request from the FBI, letting them know that they could get what they needed. Didn't he? Working in good faith.
Wasn't he just cooperating with everything that was being asked of them?
It seems like it. I mean, we don't know for sure. You never know. Maybe there's some lie going on where there was cooperation that wasn't happening. But even if that's true, this was an overstep.
Well, the evidence seems to point that they were cooperating 100%. So why send them in there? And I think this goes back to, are we living in a banana republic?
Right. Well, and to go back to the double standard thing, then the other side of it that you see, besides the fact that they're doing this to Trump, when you know darn well they wouldn't be doing this to a Democrat
No.
president. They've never
No,
done this to
that's for
presidents
sure.
in the past. But then on top of that, then the media has been reacting to the right's protestations and complaints over this, deflecting to this right-wing violence being the problem of the situation, and that's another thing that's a total double standard.
As if they never complained about the police, as if they never complained about a government, a branch of the government doing things that they didn't like, as if that has never happened.
And that plays to a little bit of a different issue, which is that they play both sides of the aisle, as far as
well, it's hypocrisy is what it is. Hypocrisy.
If they do something, if the police do something they like, then the police are the best. And if the police do something they don't like, then the police are the worst. And there's no balance in that. It's just like whatever's in the moment is the response you get. Now, to be fair, you see that on the right too. We spin things. Everybody spins things. But there's definitely more.
Yeah.
There's more spin, less reasonable discourse,
and it does
coming
it
from
does bother
from the
me.
media
It does bother me when the right does it, because I must have seen this quite a few times. But when Bill Clinton would give a State of the Union address, he would say things, let's say, about healthcare, and he would go through different things that they were trying to accomplish in Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, Social Security. And typically the Republicans would sit down, they wouldn't clap, they would sit there stone-faced. And then I saw George W. Bush, who followed Clinton, and he would stand up and he would say almost verbatim the exact same things. And the Republicans would stand and clap while the Democrats would sit down and they would be the ones sitting stone-faced.
I hate that.
Yes.
That kind of stuff's garbage. And I mean, that's actually the whole point I made in our previous podcast last week, was that I felt that was happening with the whole redefining a recession thing, is that we were doing exactly what the left would be doing in our position, and the left was doing exactly what we would be doing in their position. I don't know if I said that.
Yeah,
correctly,
well, the big difference in this one is you would not have seen a Republican president until now, because now the Democrats have set a standard. They've now created a situation where sitting presidents and sitting members of the DOJ will go against a former president of the United States. And I would almost say, mark my words, this will happen if Donald Trump becomes president again. He will go after Joe Biden with his Department of Justice and try to go after.
Maybe.
No, I do think he will. I absolutely think he will. I'm just to the point where I'm not going to say mark my words, but I do think that he will, because how many times is they going to go after him and he's just going to sit there and take it?
Here's the reason why I think maybe not. Joe Biden's not going to ever run for president again. So there's less
no, he's not going
to try to stop him and put him down.
But the point being that Joe Biden is getting away with incredible crimes that he has committed. Some I would dare say treasonous crimes against the United States.
Crime?
Alleged, whatever. I just happen to think it's.
We have to state for legal reasons.
Yeah, well. It's my opinion that it's not alleged. So, but I do think that he has committed those crimes, and for people to get away with stuff like that, and this is what really fuels anger for a lot of Republicans, is to see that Republicans in Congress almost never get anybody to answer or be held responsible for the things that they've done. Even the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, they had Hillary Clinton basically over a barrel, and they did nothing. All we get, and this really bothered me with a tweet, not a tweet, but a post from, it was a tweet, from Ted Cruz, who said, we need subpoenas, we need answers, we need this. Look, as a Republican, and I'm sure a lot of Republicans feel this way, we're just tired of people being called into Congress, asking them questions, having them lie to our faces, and then they are held completely unresponsible for anything. Nothing happens. And Republicans are really sick and tired of it. And so that's why when they see things that are going on right now, like what the Democrats are doing to the Republicans, just for being associated with Donald Trump, they are getting major decisions in courts made against these people. They're having to go to jail. They're being persecuted. You've got people who are now political prisoners and who were at the Capitol. They have not been tried. They're not allowed to see their attorneys. They're treated horribly in the prisons where they're being held. Most of them, or many of them, being held in solitary confinement for months, not being let out, and not a word comes from the Democrats. And you would not see this happen from a Republican administration. I just don't think you would.
Well, I have two pieces of commentary in response to that. One on the previous point, but I think to say that nothing happens is probably not entirely correct. Yes, we'd like to see more happen, but the whole point of doing it is that when you have someone hauled before the committee, and then Ted Cruz gets up there and makes him look like a fool by asking him obvious
by
questions
being Ted Cruz
answer
because he was so good as a prosecutor, never lost a case before the Supreme Court.
He's not 100% on the ball, but he does pretty good. But anyway, the point is that gets it out there. It puts it out there before people, and it does affect voting. I think it affects the potential for the next election, and I think that's the point, is to get it out there. If that happens with what's going on now, and Merrick Garland's hauled before and Ted Cruz rips them apart on what's happening with this raid, it's going to help to show how political it was. And so it's an information sharing of information that can get out in there and get onto certain news sources that it might not otherwise be understood and heard about, and that's a good thing.
Well,
so there is some good to it, but I agree, not as much as you wish there would be in some cases.
This kind of leads to an email that not an email, but an op-ed that Steve Deace from The Blaze wrote.
Can I throw my other comment down real quickly, because I'll totally forget it if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quickly. I do think that we need to be careful to give Biden even the same thing that we give Trump when it comes to innocent until proven guilty. And there tends to be a growing sentiment to demand guilt, and then you have to prove your innocence, especially in the political arena. And I think that we need to, not do that. We can presume, we can definitely demand investigation. We can definitely demand trials. We can demand that sort of thing. But to just assume right up front that Biden's absolutely guilty without it having been proven through the legal process, I think we should be careful about that, just generally, because we want them to do the same to our side of the
we
aisle.
don't want mob. We don't want.
It should be an equal standard.
We do not want mob justice. The Democrats seek mob justice. The Democrats live by mob justice. We do not want to live or seek mob justice.
Right. Anyway, okay, going on with your article.
Look, sometimes you just wish that you could have a heavy, healthy dose of Old West justice. That would be somewhat satisfying sometimes. It wouldn't be right, but it would be satisfying.
I can't agree with that.
It would be No, it wouldn't be right, but it could be satisfying.
Satisfying in the same way it would be to sometimes murder someone, is what you're getting at?
Look, okay, so Clint Eastwood wasn't murdered in Hang 'em High. In
the movies.
In Hang 'em High, he wasn't murdered.
In the
he
movies,
was hung with Old West
you.
justice, but then he got justice because he was innocent. So if you're innocent, I guess the idea is, if you are innocent, you're going to come back and you're going to serve justice on those that tried to kill you.
Through a court of law and the proper legal
Now look, it
procedure.
happens in the movie, so it must be true.
Must be
It must
true
be
in
true.
the movies. Must be good. Everything in the movies is good. That's where we've gotten to the moral
Oh,
understanding we
yeah,
have in our day
yep,
and age.
yep,
From the
absolutely.
movies have taught us
Oh,
well.
absolutely. It's the
So
education of today. Okay, so Steve Deace wrote this is a an article titled "Tim Scott would make a better snitch than senator." Now, most people know Senator Tim Scott as the senator from South Carolina. He was the first black senator of a Republican in the United States Senate. And
right.
so he's been lauded many times because of that. He has spoken, I think he spoke at the Republican convention when Trump was trying to win re-election. And but at the same time, he kind of falls under this umbrella of being part of the deep state or being part of the do nothing Republican. So Steve Deace starts off. I got some attention this week for kneecapping South Carolina Senator Tim Scott in response after he sheepishly, and I'm being kind here, responded to the raid of former President Donald Trump's home with a plea for letting the system do its work before jumping to conclusions. This is where I think a lot of Republican voters get very upset. I'm not reading here anymore. This is me. So they get very upset because we hear let's let the system do its work. And you commented just a minute ago, we do need to allow people to be tried the way that they're supposed to be tried, as according to the Bill of Rights. You are innocent until proven guilty. We shouldn't do away with that. But he's got some really good points here. And so he says, oh, you mean the system that brought us locking you down while they went on vacation? That made you wear masks when they didn't? That shut down your churches but kept the rainbow orgies going? That jabbed you with side effects and canceled you on social media for complaining about it? That take private planes while making your gas unaffordable? That is actively attempting to erase our southern border while obsessing about Ukraine's? That anointed Russian collusion as a certainty but couldn't be bothered to know what a Hunter Biden is? That assassinated Brett Kavanaugh's character while letting Merrick Garland go wild, labeling concerned parents as domestic terrorists? That U.S. citizens who protested their government on January 6th are now rotting in prison without due process while groomers run wild in our government schools? You want me to put my faith in that system, Senator Scott? Because I've got other plans, and quite frankly, they aren't negotiable with the likes of appeasers like you. For example, if the GOP wins Congress in November, it should do nothing less than shut down the entire federal government until the persecutions and banana republic nonsense I laid out above stops. Because if Senator Scott's flaccid fraternity continues to fund this fascist monster after all this, we all might as well move to Ukraine. Here is the fundamental question on the table for the Republican Party. Do you finally hate what Democrats are determined to do to the country more than you hate your own base? Still need help working through that pickle? Well, as always, I'm here to help. Consider for a second that when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis stepped up to keep sexual deviance out of the curriculum of elementary school students, it was labeled by the Democrats' groomers as "Don't Say Gay Bill," and they subsequently began shouting the word gay like feral children throughout the halls of their state house. Yet now, when monkeypox is running amok within the gay community, the very same people who shouted gay, gay, gay are suddenly a tramp stamp of those three see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys. How dare you say gay and monkeypox in the same sentence? And who cares if the CDC is doing it even though we loved its COVID propaganda? Can you see it now, Senator Scott? The lie is the point. The undoing of reality is the goal. There is no system to trust. We are meant as citizens to simply accept that the power belongs to somebody else. And the longer we complain about it, the more painful and the hurt will be. That's why Donald Trump is about to be frog-marched. Not because the system is working, but because the system has been utterly destroyed. At this point, Senator Scott, I'd have more respect of your limp-wristed pleas to let this play out if you were actually in on the plot. Because you'd make a far better snitch than senator, if this is what you really think. Repeat after me, Senator Scott. Hail Hydra. Not very nice.
I'm glad you had a sandwich before we started here, so you don't get hangry.
Yes, I was getting hangry, the hanger has subsided. If I had read that while still being hungry and having that hangry attitude welling up inside of me, I would have.
I'm more concerned with you getting hangry at me, because I don't know that I agree with all of that. I think it's going a bit too far.
I've got to say, I know Steve, what Steve Deace is about. I've listened to him a lot. I've read his one of his books. Steve Deace is a straight shooter. He's a straight shooter.
And that's not necessarily what I'm even talking about. I don't know that anything that you said was specifically wrong. I just don't know that accusing someone of saying, let's let the system play out and see how this goes before we really get angry justifies that sort of response.
Then I think you missed the point of the article, because the point of the article is we have sat and we have let the system do what it's doing while our violins have been played by the left, and while we are getting tramped on over and over and over. And when someone like Tim Scott says, let's let the system, it's a baby reaction to it. He's not standing up.
An example of the system playing itself out, though, is look at what's happened to Trump heretofore. So we have the Russian collusion. We have 2 impeachments with the Ukraine thing. We have all these other attacks, and nothing has actually gone
It hasn't
anywhere.
stuck, is what you're trying to say. It hasn't stuck.
It hasn't stuck because the system works. Now, are we in danger of the system not working? Sure. Are they trying to break the system so it doesn't work anymore?
You say the system works.
But the system is to an extent. There are still checks and balances. There are still, like even with what's going on with Trump right now in the raid, like the FBI does not convict. And so if Trump gets railroaded and gets convicted by a kangaroo court, then we could say, okay, the system's broken if we believe that it was unjust and unfair. But the truth is that they probably won't ever do anything with this because there probably is nothing to convict on.
But a court signed off on the warrant. A court signed off on the warrant. A court signed off on the warrant to have his campaign spied on.
Sure, there's imperfections. The system isn't perfect, and it can't be. But there are checks and balances. There are appeals. There are forces at play that do mean the system, to a certain extent, is still working.
Did the system,
even though it is flawed?
Did the system work when Proposition 8 was overturned by a single judge in California, even after the PETA voted for it?
There are examples, yeah, absolutely. And I see your point. I'm just not sure, and I agree with that. And there's other examples of that. But is that what Tim Scott meant? Is my question.
I think
I've heard Tim Scott speak. I've listened to him talk. He's and I googled him while you were talking and stuff, and some of the commentary, just the headlines of some of the things he's saying, right on the money, and I agree with him and stuff. And I think I don't know what he meant, so I don't
think
know
Tim
that I'm
Scott,
defending him.
I don't think Tim. I think the reason what really set Steve Deace off, and it does set me off as well, is where is the outrage from Tim Scott? That's the point. Where's the outrage? Look, Ron DeSantis, we both love, he talked about the FBI raid. He said the federal regime is targeting those it dislikes for disfavored treatment. They are demanding we get in line or face the consequences. Now the regime is getting another 78,000 IRS agents to wield against its adversaries. With this addition, the agency is now larger than the Pentagon, State Department, FBI, and Border Patrol combined, and billions of dollars are now being directed to fund these new hires. Democrats are not simply expanding an agency, they are growing their army of Biden regime soldiers standing ready to execute any order by the D.C. swamp. This is the outrage that we want from the Republicans, and why so many Republicans are doing
one of the headlines I'm looking at right here is Tim Scott talking about how the IRS does not need an $80 billion investment. So he's clearly speaking out.
But where's his outrage for Mar-a-Lago raid?
but who are we to define how anyone expresses their outrage? Like, I tend to talk in a lot, calmer terms than other people, or I try to at least, simply because I'm trying to not express things in terms of, once again, yelling at the TV like when the ref makes a bad call in response to these sorts of things, because I don't necessarily think that that's a useful way to respond to most situations. That doesn't necessarily mean that I don't believe that we need to get out and make some changes, or that that we shouldn't be hauling people in front of the Senate. I would bet if you ask Tim Scott that he's totally in favor of pursuing these answers.
But that's not what he said.
And so
that's
I don't
not
know.
what he said. What he said is we need to let the system play out. Look, Ron DeSantis went on. He said, the fact that the left is turning taxpayer-funded government agencies into extensions of the Democrat machine to do their political bidding right before our eyes should be alarming to every American. These are not actions.
And it should
be. These are not actions indicative of leaders in a free republic. This mirrors a banana republic.
There's that term again.
Redefined. Yes. Well, no, because we've come to accept long before this.
One thing we didn't say before
is
that we had said on the first time we recorded this is that what I think is a better way to refer to it is like a communist government. These governments like China, the USSR, places like that, which is significantly scarier in a lot of ways than a banana republic.
It is, but I think we're seeing a lot of the same motions that communist governments, how they got set up, because every single one of them came into power by overturning the previous power, and by either making them political prisoners, by killing them, by prosecuting them, by going after them in some way or another. That's how communist dictatorships have all gotten into power. And that's what's happening here. Going
back to the idea of the system being in place still, let's say, just for a thought experiment, that they're successfully convict Trump on crimes and throw him in jail, right? Does that mean we're doomed? Does that mean the Democrats are in power for all the rest of time? Or does that mean that Ron DeSantis runs and becomes our next president?
Yeah, see, that's the whole thing.
We still have a system in place that it's not about one man. It's not about one dictator who then gets replaced by another dictator. We still have a system that if voters get out and call for it to be a certain way, at least so far, and it remains this way, thankfully, that we still have a system in place where we can still affect change through the people's will, even if Trump got thrown in jail. Now, it'd be an outrage if it was done unfairly and unjustly, and it would be an implication of a serious flaw in the system, but that doesn't mean the system at large is busted yet.
Okay, so
now if we have Biden declare himself a dictator and the army gets behind him and all of a sudden the government's disbanded the new Emperor Biden, then now the system is down.
Did the system work in 2020, November 2020 election?
That's a hard judgment call to make. I know both you and I have suspicions, but
strong suspicions in my case. Definitely
strong suspicions, but
there's a lot of evidence that points that it was not. That at least Arizona, I have a very strong suspicion that the Georgia race was heavily influenced to go the Democrat way. Pennsylvania receiving votes in the middle of the night from New York State. Why was Pennsylvania receiving votes from voting ballots from New York State?
Well, we'll save that for another podcast.
But you're going after. But you're saying the system. You keep saying the system, and what I'm saying is the system failed us in 2020. Because if the honesty was in place the way it should be in place, I do not believe at all that Donald Trump would not be president. I do not believe Joe Biden. Now, you telling me this guy that can't
here's the thing.
He can't even form a sentence. The guy doesn't know what he's doing. He can't put a suit jacket on without his wife helping him.
But without talking about specifically, that specific instance necessarily, if we talk about it just in broader general terms about the system, and this is another comment we made
want the
before,
system to work. I think is more than what I think it's working.
Right, but the system. Well, what I'm going to say is that the system itself is insufficient. and any system is. You often hear people talking about the failure of democracy or different things like that, and any system can fail. Any system has potential flaws because systems are made up of people, and people are potentially evil. And so anytime that you have the majority of people believing in and supporting evil ideas, it doesn't matter what the system is. The system's going to fail them. The question is, of course, are some systems more resilient to that? And I think that the system that we have in the United States has shown itself to be extremely resilient to that. But that doesn't mean it's perfectly resilient to it. If you get enough evil people, bless you. Is that what you say to someone coughing, swallowing their
swallowing my
wrong?
Water down the wrong pipe?
That was hard liquor, I think, is what you just took.
No.
Any system that you have, if you have enough people that are willing to break the rules, and the way we talked about it when we talked about it last time that didn't get recorded, was the Justice Scalia. Scalia, thank you. Good grief. Justice Scalia talking about the parchment agreement that you have with
the Parchment of Rights. The parchment. You don't have a Bill of Rights. We have a Parchment of Rights.
Yeah. And that doesn't do any good if people don't believe in it and don't support it and don't follow it. And that is definitely a direction that we're heading as the country becomes more and more wicked, to use a lack of a better term, as we head more and more towards socialistic ideas and more towards removing the freedom of people being a good idea and the support of, murdering babies and et cetera, free sex on demand and
rainbow jihad. Going preying upon our children in schools.
The system's not going to survive that once that becomes the majority of everyone's wants, everyone's wills. If everyone in the country wants to destroy freedom, freedom cannot stand. It doesn't matter what system's in place; the system will fall.
Well,
so the only way that
ancient civilizations were destroyed from within.
And that's what we're seeing now, is we're seeing this attack on freedom, as if freedom itself is the problem. We're seeing an attack on capitalism, as if capitalism is the problem, despite the fact that capitalism has shown greater wealth development than any other system ever. There's never been a system that's developed as much wealth as capitalism has. And capitalism has essentially removed true poverty. Like, even people who are poor in capitalism still have resources that people in other systems don't have and never had access to, because the system itself was not as good at doing that as capitalism. Does that mean capitalism is perfect? No. Does it have the potential for flaws? Yes. If people are evil within that system, is evil going to happen? Yeah. There's no system that can protect against evil. If people are going to be evil, any system's going to allow for evil, because people are going to override the system if nothing else. And of course, with something like capitalism, it's a free market, and free being the key. So there's really no overriding evil in pure capitalism. If someone's going to be evil in a pure free market, the only checks and balance you have on that is the market itself, which does check it to an extent.
Yeah, well, capitalism,
but not perfectly.
The free market is governed by the people. That was the whole point of this experiment of the United States, was being governed by the people. Liberty is not about. We keep seeing this term being thrown out by those on the left and the right, quite honestly, and that's the term democracy. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. We have democratic principles. We have democratic methods. Voting is a democratic type of system, but it is not the point of it. The republic is that we have individual liberties, and the Constitution guarantees that the individual liberties, or the liberties of individuals, outweighs the rights of the people as a whole. And in a democracy, it's the whole, it's the majority that rules. Here we have a different situation. We are built upon the notion or the promise that an individual's rights cannot be trampled on just because the public or because the majority demands it. That's why things like innocent until proven guilty, right to a speedy trial, right to not incriminate yourself, right to property and life, those are individual liberties, but in a democracy, those can change. You can lose those things because you would not have control over your own life. It's the majority that has control. And if you're in that, you're in that minority, yeah, good luck to you.
And you can lose those things even in the republic as well. If the
we're
system
seeing those things
doesn't
being
stand up to the evil.
We're seeing those things being lost.
But another important part of what our country is. That
Hold on.
Overlooked.
I want to go back a second. And we barely touched on this. You said we can lose those things in a republic, not if the principles of the republic are followed. So I think that's different.
Well, that's exactly my point. Is the way that you lose them.
Yes, you're not going to lose them because you are in a republic. You are going to lose them because people in a republic who have bad intentions are going to cause you to lose them.
Right. It's like, if you're playing sports and the rule is don't punch someone in the face as you run past. If people start punching each other in the face and the ref doesn't call it, the system breaks down and you can lose that despite the rule.
Hence the
reason
why you get very outraged and yell at the television.
Right. He punched him in the face. Yep. Come on, ref.
And then they talk about it on social media for the next 2 days.
I was going to say another part of what our country is that often gets overlooked is that we are a republic of united states. And the states' rights, we were individual states with our own governments who came together and agreed to be united, but still remain as separate states, united together.
Under sub-governments.
And separate may be the wrong word there, but you know what I'm saying. And so
one state
rights
cannot dictate or demand what another state does.
Yeah. And that's why the republic works the way it does with representative democracy, is because every state, that's why the Senate, every state has to, this is basic, Saturday morning, what was that cartoon called? The
Bugs Bunny?
Nah, the one that taught you lessons on
Do you think I watched
we are a bill on Capitol Hill one?
Oh yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. But
Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock. There we go. Yeah. Basic Schoolhouse Rock information that I'm sharing now. But we each have, 2 senators. The reason why we all get 2 senators, no matter what your population is to try to balance that out a little bit, so that you don't have just, the representation of every state becomes a little bit more, there's more equilibrium in that. So if you have a small state with a smaller population, you still are going to have some level of control. Otherwise, what's the point of joining the union if you have no say and no meaning whatsoever? The reason why these states were willing to get together and join the union is through that compromise of being able to have a say as an individual state. And so states' rights get overlooked a lot, and especially by the left. The left wants everything centralized into the federal government, but we're not a big federation. We are a group of united states.
So what you're saying is we are not a
matter.
federation of planets. We are a republic. So how do we fix it, though? We've got a lot of problems. We got a lot of people who we don't like that are doing things. Look, I want nothing more.
I'm going to throw out the most optimistic answer that I can. We can't fix it. We're doomed.
Yes. Look,
it's all doom and gloom moving forward.
We've talked about this before. I don't understand the voters in Kentucky. My point is we need to vote, but what is wrong with the people in Kentucky? Why do you keep voting for this idiot senator who controls the Republicans in the Senate? Why?
I can't speak for the people of Kentucky.
They're a bunch of...
But I can say...
Dumb.
I have nothing to say about Kentucky other than I don't know
Other than
anything
they
about
have
Kentucky.
horse races, and they
I
and
know
they and they
bourbon
have
comes from
blue. They have
Kentucky,
blue
and
grass. They have blue grass
I think there's a long rifle is or something
and a
related to
television show,
Kentucky
The
there.
Kentuckian. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, The Kentuckian.
Um.
Look,
Well, it does go to it goes to the point of what you're asking though, and it
is
goes back
voting
to
enough?
exactly what I was
Is
saying.
voting enough? Is voting going to change this? Because what has voting done for
Yeah,
us?
you hear this commentary a lot that it's like get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote.
But they
That's the
keep
most
voting for
important
the
thing.
same
And I think to
people.
myself, how is voting alone going to save the republic if people are voting for the removal of freedoms? Like it can't. Like voting for evil things will destroy us as surely as not voting. And so the thought that you had last time we spoke, I don't know, do you want to share it and put words in your mouth for you? But
You're gonna have to
do you
remind
need
me.
me to
You're gonna have
remind
to
you?
remind me.
It's on educate yourself.
Educate
is what you
yourself.
said.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
all right. So we can't stop. We can't keep putting people in power who are in power right now. We can't keep doing that. We can't keep voting for the same people year after year, decade after decade,
When they're
when
failing
they
us.
are failing us. Mitch McConnell, you've failed us. Kevin McCarthy, just grow a backbone. We have people in Congress who really do have the best, the most righteous desires, in my opinion. Not most righteous, but they have righteous desires to see that this country succeeds. They don't want this country to fail. They are willing to do all that it takes to make sure that our individual freedoms are protected. But they are fighting a battle even against their own party to do it. And so I'm going.
Well, and they're hated and despised and demonized, and it's really bad.
I'm going somewhere with this, and it really is that there has been a call now for several years that I don't think the American people even know that it's a possibility, and that is we can have a convention of states.
The convention of states.
The convention of states
Which
the states can get together. It has to be 37 states that agree, but we get together. We have a convention. We vote to change the Constitution. We vote, or at least the states do that are participating. They vote, and then it has to be ratified, and it would end up passing despite Congress. And despite the President of the United States.
And there is some, there's definitely some popularity towards that end growing. We'll see what happens. It's, at this point, I think a long shot, but things could change. But it speaks to how important local elections are. And that's another thing we mentioned last time, that a lot of times we think, okay, who you vote for as president is that's what matters, as if the president
should not have the influence over.
He's not a dictator.
He shouldn't have the influence over our lives the way he's having influence over our individual lives.
Yeah. But local politics really matters, and I think a call to get more involved. I haven't been involved in local politics as I should. So this is something I need to take to heart myself, is to get into local politics better. At the state level, politics matters. We are, once again, we're sovereign states, that have united together.
Get in with your
to form
school
a federation
boards.
of planets.
Get in with your school boards. Go to your school board meetings. If you don't like what's going on in the school boards, guess what? Anybody can run. Anybody can become a school board member. You don't have to have a history and education at all. You don't even have to be a parent. You can go and you can affect the change that you want to see in your community. If you are concerned about the things that are being done in your community, you have the opportunity to run for your local school board. Look, our school systems have been inundated. They've been taken over by leftist Marxists. They want to see our children be robots. They want the children to not have an education. They want them to do what they want to do, so they fill their heads with all kinds of leftist, Marxist propaganda, and the kids end up hating their country, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So be involved.
Yeah. So, and then I think
And
on
if
a
that doesn't work,
final
burn
note,
them down. I mean, just don't.
I think you
don't-
better clarify that you didn't
don't
mean that.
burn down your schools.
Don't burn anything down.
No.
We're not actually calling for violence.
No,
I think
we're not, and we really shouldn't. You know, if you
no, we're not. And
if you go if you go back to what some angry Republicans have done in history, look at the Oklahoma City bombing. That was done by a far right guy.
well, that ties into my my thought that, you know, when you ask the question, what's the solution? I have to go back to the idea that the only solution to saving any system is for the people within that system to be good, to be righteous, to be whatever term you want to use, to make good choices that are in support of that system. And if people don't believe in the principles of the system, and more than a majority adapt that, then the system's going to fall. So the only solution that we really have is to promote that. You know, you hear the concept that politics is downstream of culture, and which I think was Breitbart who said that. And I think that that's true, you know, especially when you broadly understand culture to mean, you know, the thoughts and hearts and feelings and education and intelligence of the people within the system. That is your culture. And if people enjoy hating, violent, you know, free sex for all, shut your neighbor up if you don't like what he has to say, go out and riot anytime, you know, protest everything and scream like a baby because you don't like things, and that's the way the majority of the country wants to be, the system's going to fall. And so promoting against those things and trying to develop a way that we can talk to our neighbors in kindness and use our influence to influence people to step back and to rethink the way that they feel about those things, to have a modicum of sanity in the way these things are approached. That's really the only way that we're going to save the system.
Well, that's I think what, you know,
it's a long shot.
Well,
though.
what you're describing is a counterculture. We have to have a counterculture to counter those things.
Isn't that funny that the right has become the counterculture now? Like conservatives are the counterculture now.
Well,
I feel so cool, man. I've never been cool my whole life, and all of a sudden,
no matter what, we'll never, by pop culture standards, we'll never be considered cool. But I think you did touch on something, and that is to.
I know, but the counterculture doesn't care if the mainstream considers them cool,
true.
which is
that
why
is
they're cool.
That's why they're cool.
That's what makes them cool.
Well, you know, the counterculture in this case, you talked about, we just have to not just be good, we have to be righteous. And the only way to be righteous is we have to turn to God. If we are not turning to God, if we are not letting Him dictate how we live our lives, and that just means, are we following the principles that have been laid out for thousands of years? The golden rule: love your neighbor. Love thy neighbor. If we follow,
and I think
if we followed that one simple rule, love thy neighbor, we're not talking about love your neighbor. We're talking about loving our neighbor, being kind to other people. Look, there are people that I know that I couldn't disagree with them more about the way that they live their lives, about the way that they speak, about maybe some of their personal habits, but be kind. Be kind. I love that about the live action remake of Cinderella that Disney did. This was a few years ago.
No, don't you can't praise Disney. We're conservatives.
I'm going to praise this part about it because it was such a
we have a whole podcast coming up on Disney.
It made a deep it made a
listening.
very deep impression on me anyway, and I think it did my son as well. But it was very well done in the film, and that was Cinderella. Here she was taught from a very young age by her mother before she died, be kind and have courage. And with those words, she lived by those words despite her stepmother and her evil stepsisters treating her horribly. And all through that, she lived, be kind and have courage. She had the courage to stick to her principles, but she continued to be kind, and that's how we need to treat other people.
That becomes particularly difficult when the person is your enemy. And so we know, like in the teachings of Christ, that we love those who despitefully use us. We turn the other cheek. We love your enemies.
We don't condone what they do.
That is a challenging thing.
We don't.
That's a really challenging thing to do, but it's important.
We don't condone what they do. We don't support what they do. What we do is how we treat them. Are we treating
and how we treat them, and how we respond to them, and how we continue to love them, even when, because we don't like what they do, they call us hateful, and they call us terrible, and they call us racist, and they call us these terrible names because we don't agree with their principles, and we think what they're doing is sinful at some level, or just bad for the country, or problematic in any regard. Then all of a sudden we're accused of being hateful. And when people are screaming at you that you're a hateful, racist, bigoted, racist, terrible person, then you still have to stand back and love your enemy. And that's a challenging thing, but it's imperative if we're going to make it through.
Look, if you.
But like I said, there's no hope. We're doomed.
I think this is a good. I think this is a good way to look at it. If you are living a Christ-like life, nobody will know anyway, because you're not boastful about it. They will know you as a kind person. They will.
Right, but that is knowing about it from a certain point of view.
It is from a certain point of view, but it doesn't become a thing to them. If you are an angry person about the way things are being done, if you complain a lot to people, if you are very vocal, you are going to end up, you will make enemies. Now, however, understand that even despite the attacks that you may receive, we have been told and taught by Christ that we can be persecuted for our beliefs.
We will
be persecuted for our beliefs, for following him, because he was persecuted. And even if that happens, we have a place for us in heaven. We will be able to stand at our judgment and be judged according to our righteous works, while those who stood against us will be judged according to their unrighteous works.
Their choice to not be righteous.
Right.
Just call it wicked. Call it what it is. Wicked.
Yes, wickedness. And wickedness never was happiness.
Right. And that's a deep enough subject that I think we ought to plan another show on it. Turning to God, and because I think you're right. That is the ultimate solution here: is the country has to turn to God, or we are actually doomed. And how do we turn to God, and what does that mean and stuff? That's a pretty big topic. So I think we should
in the books
address that again.
Let's do it.
In the
it's
future.
In the books.
So, in the books.
Done.
So thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Please do like or dislike if you didn't like. Subscribe, comment. Those things really help out the channel, or at least I hear tell, since nobody likes and subscribes and comments yet. I haven't seen the
We need
fruits of that
commenters.
yet.
We need people to like us. We want people
And
to
so
like us.
feel free, like if you
don't like
totally
us,
disagree with us,
yes,
think we're terrible, feel free to say so. We're not gonna just keep your language clean. Other than that, say whatever you want.
If you are
We're
a
not
Democrat and you got
attack you
through
back.
this entire episode, boy, do I.
Then now you're a Republican. We've
yes,
converted you.
No, I respect that a lot. And if you disagree with anything that we've said, please comment below. And maybe
we'll see you again next week.
All right. Yep. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Signing off.